Welcome, everybody, to Dev Heads, the show about the ins, outs, and goings on of game development. I'm Michael Tsarouhas. Please say hello to Jay.
Hello.
And Adam.
Everybody.
We're talking today about Black Mesa and finding a publisher. Adam, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you the very quick rundown of some of my background. I went to college at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, which is now defunct. Started as an artist on Black Mesa while I was in college, circa 2006. And the whole goal of that was to sort of get a portfolio so that I could go into the game industry and use my degree. I had some friends pull me onto Black Mesa. I didn't even finish the art test. They're like, nah, he's good. Just bring him on. So first tangent of the day, make as many connections as you can and don't burn bridges, because stuff like that happens all the time in the game industry. So super fortunate to have those friends that were able to get me on a project as just kind of like a little side thing to do while I was wrapping up school. Started at a small-ish company called Page 44 Studios. I think there was 40 employees there at the time. Had a ton of fun there. My first game was Tony Hawk Proving Ground, porting that to PS2 and the Wii. And as a Tony Hawk kid growing up in the 90s, that was a total dream come true. Page 44 ended up getting acquired by Zynga. Zynga eventually laid me off with a very generous severance package, so no complaints there either. And while all of that was going on, I was also doing the Black Mesa stuff. Went from being an artist to the lead artist, and then eventually just sort of fell into being the project lead because the previous lead went on to do other great things. After the 2012 release, Valve actually approached us about taking the game to retail and to Steam. And we considered that for a long while and then decided it would be the best for the project. Put the game onto Steam. It did really well, super fortunate to have all the support that we had on that front. And then we decided to turn the studio in Crowbar Collective itself into a full-time development studio. Because previously on Black Mesa, there was a couple of us that were working full-time on it, but most people were just, after they come home from work and then work on another game. So it was a really big learning process of converting a studio, starting a new project, and just getting all those ducks in a row.
That is a great synopsis of quite a long and interesting career. I actually, Adam and I have worked together, right? We worked together on Black Mesa years ago, but I never knew that you worked on a Tony Hawk game. That's sick.
Yeah, actually, hold on. This is going to be a disaster.
What you got?
It's hanging on my
Tony
wall.
Hawk.
Yeah.
Oh, shit. Could you hold that a little closer, or is it too fragile?
Oh, no, it's good.
Nice. Oh, and it's got that iconic PS2 branding.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it was porting. It wasn't I wasn't at Neversoft or anything, but it was a fantastic experience.
But porters are unsung heroes.
Yes, absolutely.
They gotta take it. Here's the thing about porting for anybody who's listening: you take what other people have made, and you need to do it in a really good way, right? If you do a really good job, people don't really care because they're just playing the same game. And it's deliberately supposed to not be that noticeable, usually, because I'm not talking about a remaster or remake here. I mean, a port. And then on top of that, if you don't do a good job, you can easily get the finger pointed straight at you or zero credit in some contracts.
Yep. Yeah, and back then we were going for the Xbox 360 over to the lesser consoles, the PS2 and the Wii. So it was breaking up the levels and redoing some of the design. It was just a pretty interesting workflow.
It's fascinating with porting, right? Because a lot of the times, especially now and with these big AAA projects, a lot of the companies that are either porting or doing, auxiliary kind of model work, their entire companies aren't credited in the credits at all. They're kept invisible. And that's in their contracts, and they also reserve the rights to basically then name you if things do go wrong. Which is just
I didn't realize that.
Extreme versions of what Mikey was saying. It's wild. There's so many unsung heroes in game dev,
Absolutely.
testers, QA. I mean, maybe I'm biased, but sound design.
No, you're right, man. You're right there. Although I guess I could be a little biased because I'm at least adjacent to the video side. But I think you're right. Aside from talking about you and your history, Adam, one of the other things that we want to talk about today is about finding a publisher. Not a lot of people, I think, not a lot of the players understand just like what that process looks like. And one of the things we're going to kind of dig into today is what that process has been like for you and your teams.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of like as a general, maybe starter question, I think that might be good is, how did you guys come to this decision? Because Crowbar Collective was modders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mostly, if not all. Correct me if I'm wrong. How'd you get to a point where like, well, you know what? I think we need a publisher.
Yep. No, that's a great question. We sort of started piloting things in parallel with Black Mesa, and we needed dev funds, which might sound surprising because Black Mesa has been very successful, but we built that project as to be as fair as possible to the developers. So it wasn't Crowbar Collective had this really successful game called Black Mesa. It was the team had this successful game. So we made sure that was as fair as possible. So first off, it's generally what most people find. They need development funds to bring their game to fruition. And sort of, I don't want to say equal to that, but something we were really looking to improve on was like marketing and being able to reach further than we could on our own. We were so fortunate on Black Mesa that people just know our name. So like we would do back in the day, like 12 images as a content media drop, and the internet would just go nuts over it. And it's like, people don't get that. Like we had a really fortunate start, and we wanted to sort of take that and, or actually the point I was trying to make with that is because we had that clout, we never had to do marketing. Like we never had to run ads or anything like that, or like reach out to influencers or all the modern things that you do to get a game out to the public. So we didn't have a lot of experience with that. So we were looking at that type of thing. If we ever wanted to go to consoles, like we were just talking about, like we as a small development studio don't have a chance of like doing that ourselves. So that was something we wanted to get more information on, and just have it be available to us. So like sort of those two main things, like funding and marketing, were the main reasons we wanted to reach out to a publisher.
I appreciate how candid that answer is, because it's true. And it's something that not everybody might acknowledge right off the bat. It's very hard to pivot in any studio or with any creative project into something that's like not the existing brand that you worked on.
Yeah.
You not only, I guess was part of it, had like a brand that we like, there was a lot of piggybacking as far as like recognition goes, and that's okay. Like that's part of the passion that fueled the creation of the team, and that passion can be transferred to something else. But that advantage, when that goes away, huge thing you got to compensate for somehow. Yeah,
and having we're not Valve, we couldn't license or use the Half-Life IP to double piggyback off of what we had already built. So anything we were doing was going to be our own IP. And regardless of the foothold you have, that's a big step, and there's a lot of work to making sure that goes off right. So we wanted to do it the right way, and like I said, we wanted to make sure that we had the funds and the resources we needed to really pull this off.
Was there ever a conversation about something like that where you talked to Valve and you were like, "Hey, what else? You want to put us on anything else within one of your cool IPs?"
A while ago, we reached out to them about maybe doing more stuff, and we decided that it's probably better if we do our own thing and build our own stuff, whether, success or failure. Like we kind of had to do our own thing. And we, like I said, had that fortune of having this successful title on Steam, and it was huge in approaching publishers too. My marketing manager, Brad, he's very good at approaching people. So we actually went to PAX, and he would just walk up to people and be like, "Hey, you looking to sign a game?" And then I could hit him with the double whammy of be like, "Yeah, we've already had a successful game on Steam. We're looking to do a follow-up to that with our own IP." And that would sort of perk their ears of like, "Oh, you've already had a game out on Steam." And then, I hate to name drop, but like you say, Black Mesa, and generally people would know what that was. So
it's the legacy, right? That legacy is originally it was the being able to do those content drops and having that connection with Valve and what you guys had before. But now, because of the warranted success of Black Mesa, like you said, you don't want to name drop, but when you need to pull out that, that gun,
exactly,
it's very easy to pull it out, and then immediately, I'm sure that perks people's ears up and gets them interested, because that's one of the hardest things, right? With, I've seen lots of friends of mine going to, events and GDC trying to find publishers, and it's a hard job to try and hunt down a publisher, because these publishers do have hundreds and hundreds of people, approaching them to try and get their games signed, and even games that are worthy and do warrant getting this funding don't get a listen in, because they're just being approached by so many people, right? And they're not seeing what it truly is. It's a hard time.
Yeah.
As much as we can talk about, or as much like I mentioned this, yeah, it's true. You guys, we had an advantage in some sense of like, we're working off of a great IP, but there's also a lot of responsibility that comes with that. The numbers don't lie. So like, once you say, yeah, we shipped something, also here are the numbers. And like Black Mesa looks publicly like an absolute success, and it is a success, clearly. So that doesn't lie to them, even though, yeah, you got to piggyback a bit. It's still saying something that people looked at it and they didn't go, no, this doesn't do justice to the original, which is hard to do with any sort of IP from an external team. Like, holy shit, right? That's a whole story.
Such a beloved IP, right? It's like, I don't envy you guys. Like, it's absolutely wild. The amount of stress, like, especially once you get that kind of public recognition, I would constantly be double guessing. Like, I'd be 3D modeling and be like, oh, does this fit the kind of the art style? Is this what the players want? I'd get so stuck in my own head, because I'm used to creating my own stuff, right, for my own IPs, rather than for something that belongs to something else. That's crazy.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and I see Kevin Sisk is in our chat, one of the developers on Black Mesa. Hey, Kevin. And I'm thinking about the suit that he was working on and he was modeling, and like, yeah, you have to. It takes a lot of time, dude. Like, nobody thinks of sci-fi IP fans as like the most understanding, flexible forms of gamers. There's a high standard when you're trying to take something so beloved and do a reimagining of it. So it did put you in a good position for sure for finding a partner.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got a bunch of stuff I want to cover. So if you guys ever need to interrupt me, do not hesitate.
Go for it. Like, get into it. Yeah.
I'm here to sort of give a different perspective. You could hypothetically make the argument that I'm being paid by a publisher, but like I'm a developer, and we're in a partnership with a publisher. But I'm not here to defend, shitty actions by publishers or giant corporations. But I do want to give a different perspective, because, we see all the negative headlines. We're probably not seeing the success stories and like the things that go well in a developer publisher relationship. And a lot of that stuff has changed over the years. There used to be like these really big publishers, and they would sign your game, and they would print the CDs and put the boxes on Electronic Boutique or GameStop or something. And like, the industry's evolved. It's diversified a lot. There's very small publishers. There's still those big names. I think that's for the better overall. It's a lot more accessible than it used to be. But especially recently, we're starting to see some of those barriers come up, and people be like really specific on what they're looking for. But again, like a lot of the people that work at publishers, they're not on the business side. They're in the trenches with the developers, and they're just gamers that want to make something that can go out to the public and they can be proud of. So like, that's kind of like the side I want to be on, and well acknowledging that there are problems and like things that we can improve on, like on all aspects of game design.
Yeah, it's I want to give a shout out to Tim Bender from Hooded Horse, who we've had on the show, which gave a beautiful perspective of what a really dedicated and focused publisher can look like, and how that can benefit not just the developers but also the gamers who love games in those genres.
Yeah,
it was so beautiful to see. It was really nice to have that chat with him.
Yeah, I think we looked into them a bunch, and they seem to have a really good thing going with their process. And I
100%.
use the term partner because I think with all those headlines that we've been seeing, publisher has a bit of a negative connotation these days. Yeah. And when you talk to people, when you talk to publishers, they say, hey, we're looking for a partner. Like they don't even call themselves publishers, even though that's what they are. And bit of an exaggeration, but they're definitely using the term partner. And that is that's how you want the arrangement to be. Like, it's a good for business overall, because if a publisher does right by their developer, the game does well. Now both sides are making money. Hopefully you can take that and keep that relationship for maybe a sequel or a related IP, and sort of all boats rise because of the success. And you need to be able to have somebody that you can say, hey, I need help with this, and they can handle it. And like, sort of, that's another tangent I have of like, in general, if you don't communicate where you need help, like if it's the last minute and you say, hey, I couldn't deliver, but it's because of this, this, and this, like that's a bad spot to be. If you're communicating the whole time and saying, I need help with this, and trying to work as a team, it's just puts everybody in a better scenario overall. And that's across all industries, not just game design.
I'm not sure if you can speak to this, so if you can't, just say "Get fucked, Jay," and move on. But like when hunting, when hunting for a publisher, as a team, what kind of relationship were you looking for with those partners, with the publishers? Like, what were the pinpoints that you wanted to get before you would know who you could partner with?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Definitely, like, we didn't care if somebody wasn't like super familiar with Black Mesa or the Half-Life series, but it definitely helped like get everybody on the same page. Familiarity with shooters was a big thing. Trying to think what else. Our ask was a bit higher on the development fund side too, but that didn't stop us from reaching out to smaller companies. There were a number of publishers that we reached out to I had never heard of before, and they got back to us and they had like these really good pitches, like, and they really sort of educated us and gave us ammo to talk to other people that might be an even better fit. And like, that's not saying they wouldn't have been a fit as well, but for whatever reason, those other companies didn't work out, and it was just a really, really big learning process. But yeah, especially as we got closer and closer to signing, we were sort of like just reaching out to everybody, and there wasn't really any barriers. If at worst, like I said, we would get some reps in with talking with people, negotiating with people, all that stuff.
It's something that you need to kind of practice and get better at. Like, you can talk, there's a lot of developers you could talk to, and they'll talk all day about how awesome their game is and how these features are great, how they're so proud of their team, and even how they have this great workflow or pipeline for X, Y, and Z. And then you talk about like, so how do you sell your game to people? And they go like, I just kind of talk about it. And that's not what you can do. It's very difficult to condense it. It's very difficult to describe your market position. It's very difficult to describe unique selling points and all these other factors. It's kind of like the game. It doesn't look completely different, but it looks different when you have to condense it. And you also got to mind your audience of who you're talking to specifically. That's another piece as well.
Totally. There's a huge power dynamic out of the start, because like you're saying, you have to condense this, even if it's a small project, you have to condense this massive amount of work into something that's like appealing in a slide deck. And that has to convince people to give you money. And like, that's a really hard thing to do. And there's a ton of YouTubes out there. If anybody's interested on like the really nitty gritty of that, it's a little bit different depending on who you're approaching, how you want to go about that. Some publishers even have like specifics of like, you should do this, this, and this. Here's a YouTube on what we look for. And another publisher might be completely different. So now you're looking at making different decks for different people. Another tangent on that is Google Slides has linked slides. So you can actually have two slides that you update one and it updates the other, which is an incredibly powerful tool to have if you need to split off those decks like I was just talking about. Just be careful that
I'm realizing something.
Accidentally put something in there. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. Maybe we should define what a pitch deck means. I think I just got a little inside baseball myself. So how would you describe, how would you define a pitch deck for people who don't know?
So it's pretty much just an overview of the project. It generally has the overview of the type of game you're making, the audience you want to target, and what you need from a publisher. And obviously that's most of the time that's dev funds, but there are publishers out there these days that don't give developer funds, that their sole role is the marketing, and the influencer stuff and translations, stuff like that. That's their whole role. So it's interesting, and like a lot of people are sort of put off by that, but I think it's actually a really cool niche to fill. But yeah, the pitch deck itself is just like a very broad overview that puts your project in the best light it possibly can, so that somebody can give you money.
It's like it's a lot of the times when we're talking about communicating unique selling points or what the kind of feel of the game is going to be, which is in one mind basically like a text version of a trailer, but it's very different because a lot of the times you can communicate a unique selling point to an audience of like, this is why you should be interested in this game and why you should want to buy it. But the amount of more information you need to provide to a publisher of just like, not only here's the unique selling point and why an audience will be interested, but also how we're going to generate revenue, what's our plan for the future of the project, like where are we going to take this, but putting all of that information into such a small package, because if it's too big, just like with anything, people will stop reading and lose interest and move on. So it's a lot of condensing.
I want to emphasize that point real quick, Jay. Like when you sit down with a team, even though it is everybody in the room, it's their job to fully understand whatever's going on with this pitch or to deliver the pitch effectively. Even though that's what everybody's focused on doing, you will notice people tuning out. Like you will notice people getting lost in the details, even if they have a genuine interest to get in. So you really have to be a very good salesperson sometimes. Other times it just clicks and it works. And I guess the reality of that is even if it does click and work and they get your game, now you have to evaluate even if you really like them, you have to evaluate if this makes good business sense, right? Adam, you have people that depend on you, right? For these strategic decisions that you make and that your leadership team makes collectively. It's a very nuanced, difficult process. It's not unique to gaming, but it's I would say it's at least special to gaming, this sort of hybrid of like the creativity angle and the business angle, right? Whereas another field might be something like, well, we just have to make sure that this moves the line up or this is efficient, as opposed to we also need to tell a wonderful story or we need to evoke a certain atmosphere or have fun gameplay and all those other difficult, nebulous things.
Yeah, and I think something people can take away for all aspects of their life too is like the sort of the executive summary. So like when we were building slides, every large font title tried to describe the details within that slide. So like we tried to tell the story just in those big block text things, so that the executive, flying through 20 of these a day, can get the gist of the game without having to read every single bullet point. GIFs are huge. If you can put in any other type of media, and it's just like if anybody's ever looked into like doing a Kickstarter or something like that, it's a project on its own. It's going to take a massive amount of time. You're going to have to keep updating it over and over and over. So like plan on that. But yeah, in general, like there's this really high level philosophy about getting information across. And it's something I try and really focus on, not just when I'm pitching to people, but like even when I'm, talking to the team or making directives or something. Like, how can we put this information as succinctly as possible so that people understand it? And then that all flows into game design as well, of like onboarding people onto your new game, tutorializing and all that stuff. Like it's all the same methodology that we're using.
Yeah, people only have so much time and focus and energy. You got to condense. It's true.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't expect people to read every giant doc that I write up with all the details in it. It's too much.
You want to create the hooks, right? You want to, this can be for people looking at a Kickstarter or publishers going, like you said, through 20 of these a day. You want to create that hook that gets them interested and then have the further information for them to properly digest it. I think something that's fascinating to me. So coming from the indie space, I'm used to, a lot of my friends effectively not begging, but like speaking to hundreds of publishers and being told to go away, basically, because it's their first project or their first project did okay, and like it doesn't have that brand recognition. So a lot of the developer publisher relationships is very different. But something you said, Adam, was that you reached out to publishers and they were effectively kind of pitching to you on why they would be a good fit. What was that like, being able to have that kind of relationship?
Yeah, and like we don't look down on anybody, but we were just sort of like wondering, like, what does this publisher that we've not heard of have to offer? And like, at least two of them like kind of blew us away in their meetings of like, oh, you're planning on this development fund for this amount of time. Why don't we extend it and increase the budget so that you're covered, outside of this, and this? And it's like, holy crap, like we didn't even think of that. Like, they're like sort of evolving our pitch for us. So like that was really interesting to see from them, and just like to sort of pivot onto the marketing thing. Like I said, we were super fortunate to have people know who we are. But like even a publisher with like a modest social media account can like really start a groundswell for what your game does right out of the gate. So people would be like, oh, we got this. There was a ton of different looks of how they handled their marketing campaigns. Some people they covered all the marketing budget themselves. Like the developer would never have to worry about that cost. Some people had odds and ends like trailers were all done in-house, so you don't have to worry about that cost either. Other people would split it with the developer 50-50 so that it's more, everybody has a stake in the marketing. I've also seen it where the marketing budget is 100% on the developer in their recoup, which I'll talk about in a minute. Which is, interesting too, because now the publisher doesn't have as much of a stake. They're like, oh, we're going to do this massive marketing campaign. And it's like, okay, cool. What is this getting us? So like going way back to your question, like lots of different interesting ideas from different publishers that I assumed there was some boilerplate publisher spec and pretty much everybody used it, but that really wasn't the case. It was all over the place.
It's awesome. It's really nice to hear. It's like such a flip of the relationship I'm used to. And like, I'll be honest, like as much as I've had positive interactions with publishers, I'm being in that indie space and used to having close friends being rejected a lot. I guess I do have this kind of mindset of publishers bad. Like there's a bit of my brain that's like that. So it's really refreshing to hear about publishers like wanting to find the best fit for the developers and stuff like that. Did you have any, like, you're probably not going to be able to say because it might suggest some things, but like, were there any pitches where you were just like, oh, this is not good for the company, in a way of like, they're like, oh, we'll get 90% of the stuff for a small investment and stuff like that? Were there any like weird ones?
There were definitely some weird ones, some ones where like things just didn't gel. The way we were sort of anticipating. There were a lot that everybody was just on the same page and clicking, and that's easy. Beautiful. When you're in like the honeymoon phase and like just sort of talking to each other. Trying to think if there was anything really standout that I can talk about. But yeah, it was kind of all over the map. There's another point I just completely lost. But anyway, I'm sure it will come to me.
Yeah, it sounds like on the whole, it was like if you got to the point where you're actually going to talk and have a call with one of these groups, there was probably something there, possibly, right? Yeah,
and most of them went really, really well. And the point I just remembered too is like there is still a very big power dynamic. Like even us in our like super awesome position, like there was a power dynamic. Like they hold all the cards. There's a YouTube by Danny O'Dwyer on the No Clip Crew channel, and he pretty much went through the exact same process we did. And he does a very good job of highlighting like the negatives and all the roadblocks they ran into trying to publish their game. Yeah. So if you want more info on that, definitely check that out. It's a fantastic video. Those guys always do great work. But yeah, like we in general had really good conversations with publishers.
So refreshing. I'm so glad to hear that. So, I'm trying to think about like what specifically we can speak to, because
there is some secrecy here, right, Adam? Because like what we're talking about today is new knowledge, right? For people who don't know, like that the Black Mesa team is signing with the publisher. But we can't go into any more detail, or is there more detail we can go into? Maybe we should nip that in the bud.
Well, I can go into the developer funds part of it.
Right.
And because that's probably what most people are interested about when they're talking about publishers. Like, what's the money? And I can't go into like specific values or anything. But there's the funds that are given to the developer so that they can finish their game. There's what's called a recoup, where the publisher makes that money back. And then there's rev splits after that recoup is completed. And if you're looking at your developer funds, generally you'll have an idea of what you need. But you can sort of look at it from the publisher's perspective as well, of like, they're at least looking to 2x their investment. So they want to make twice of what they give to a developer as funds. And that's on the very low end. You know, it could go sky high from there. So if you know roughly how much you want, if you have an idea of what you could like sell in terms of game sales, you can do the math to figure out what they're looking to make on their end. And if the math doesn't line up, if your game sales are too low for the amount of money that you're asking for, then you're probably going to know where that conversation is going to end up. And you might have to adapt the scope of your game, you know, when you're coming out, all that stuff. So it's like, I encourage people to look at it from the publisher's perspective, you know, not to give them any more sympathy, but because it will give you more information on your pitch deck and like your game development. And sort of tied to all that is like the rev splits, which is like a hot topic in the developer publishing space. We've seen it all over the place, from, you know, 70-30 where the developer gets 70%, all the way up to even above 50-50 and stuff like that. And there are trade-offs with that. It's not the assumption that like, oh, they're taking more of the rev split, it's a worse deal for us. You know, sometimes they earn that extra percentage that they're taking. You know, if your game is a high risk game, it makes sense that they would want to have a higher rev split on that. So like, again, I thought it was going to be everybody's offering the same thing, but it really wasn't. It was all over the place. And there are levers that you can move too, of like, if we do this, can we get this? So it's negotiating, which is just a nightmare all around, but it's part of the process.
How much the negotiation was in call, and how much of it was email back and forth, generally speaking?
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I'd say most of it was actually over voice. And then you'd like, trying to remember, you generally like agree on something and then just get it written down, like, hey, remember we talked about this? And it's, you know, not just to keep people honest, but like, so you can remember what you talked about, like meeting notes and stuff. But yeah, they generally voice stuff.
Yeah, makes sense. And as far as the recoup part goes, I wonder how nuanced or multifaceted, how many different kinds of recoup strategies people have, because that's a bit of a bad word. I feel like a lot of people have. Did you hear a lot of recoups where you were like, no, that's not really fair to us, or then others where it's like, well, no, that makes sense for the risk that we're going for? Or was that a consistent one? Was that usually one square deal?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because that's actually probably the most important part. Like, obviously you need enough money to finish your game, but like the recoup process, it's very hard to wrap your head around. Like, even if somebody's being completely transparent, like there's just so many variables that it's hard to understand. Like, okay, so when are we making money again? So it really pays attention.
It's important to know when money is coming to me.
And then as a side tangent too, if you're working with a publisher, say you're only Steam, there's a delay in the Steam payment that goes to the publisher. There's a delay in the publisher payment that goes to the developer. So like, you have to forecast when you make money and when you're actually going to get paid, because there's a chain that goes through that. So don't just block in funds right up till release, because you're going to have at least 2 months of not getting paid. And then with the actual recoup, trying to think of the different looks that we saw. Some people had a 100 plus recoup, so they might get 110% of the money that they gave you, and that seems kind of scary at first. But in the grand scheme of Steam sales, you can actually make that money back fairly quickly, and that's obviously not. It's all guessing. Every project's going to be a little bit different, but like, that seems really scary at first until you do the math and go through the numbers. Like, it's not so bad. Maybe, they're kind of hedging their bets by having a little extra on the recoup. There's different payments, like the way, and I'm trying to explain this as simply as possible. This is why it's like the hardest part to focus on.
Oh yeah.
They a percentage of the developer funds, like day one release, might go to recoup, while the other goes to the publisher. So you're slowly making back that recoup over time while the publisher is making money. That's something to look out for. That is the more scary one to me that I've seen out there, because it's not like you were paid $1 million, the game made some $1 million, now you're making money on the rev split. It's the money that the game is making is further being split after release, to pay back recoup and to pay the publisher. So like,
yikes, I'm sure that can get scary quick. Yeah,
and it's just another variable that you have to put into your planning, which is already very complicated to begin with. So like, just keep an eye, if you're looking for a publisher, just keep an eye on that. It's not necessarily like a bad thing. It's just something you have to account for when you're doing your planning, and make sure you understand. Contract language is extremely difficult to read. So like, I like to see
a good lawyer.
Yeah. And a number of the people we reached out to said, hey, we're going to do this in plain English first. Everybody's going to agree on that. And then we're going to give you the big legal document. And both things say the same thing, but one covers our bases on the legal side. And I really appreciated that, because like, trying to understand a legal contract and like keep all these things top of mind was just overwhelming.
Yeah, it's and that is a smart thing to do. That's going to both help make sure there's no misunderstanding, because you don't want misunderstandings.
Yep.
Doesn't help anybody. And it's also going to facilitate things, I guess, like speed it along. And after all, like, just like I was quickly saying, but like a lawyer is going to ensure that the initial, not cheat sheet, but the initial summary fits the contract, and it's worth it. As a brief aside, for people listening, this is a part of why game development is so stressful.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of, even if you're not the person involved with these kinds of decisions, you are affected by them and you work alongside them, and that stress kind of carries through. And it's why it's so, of course, upsetting when you finally push something out there, and then players who have no understanding of what the process is like talk so much shit, because it can't be understated, just like any business, how much nuance there is to the field. And it's, again, like I was saying earlier, it's all this nuance on top of the actual other really abstract and difficult thing to achieve, which is like meaningful artistic creativity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
only when the numbers make sense can that happen.
Exactly.
And you could be a solo dev and you could just throw yourself at the problem too. But even solo devs need to be mindful of all these things as well, to some degree at least.
Yep. And throwing yourself at the problem has a huge cost to your mental health and your work-life balance.
Yeah, dude.
And
it's like I was saying a few streams ago, like a lot of us are just obsessed nerds, and it's not a healthy way to live, right? Being an obsessed nerd.
Yeah, like I said at the start, I'm not here to defend these giant corporations that make terrible decisions, but I mean, I think we all can agree that a business's job is to make money. So like, I don't fault a publisher for trying to get the best deal that they can out of a relationship. Like, that makes sense. We're trying to do the same thing as a developer, talking to the publisher.
They're trying to do like you said, the same thing in the sense of their job is to make money, but that can seem very corporate and very gross. But when you think of it in the sense of, like, they need to make money so they can help create other games. Like, it's not just to have the CEO get a fat bonus at the end of the year, right? I'm sure in some cases that is true.
That does happen,
but too. But it's also, well, we need to make hopefully double our investment so then we can fund the next game, right? That we really want to publish, but we don't have the means to do so. So they can grow and get more games made. So like, they are a huge cog in the wheel of getting the games that we all want, not only to make, but also play, right? So there's a lot to it.
A huge part of the calculus is, do they have the bandwidth for it? Not just financially, but like, do they have the people that are able to give you the resources that you need for the agreement? And then, the money too, of like, hey, this is a really awesome project. We're really interested, but we just don't have the funding for it right now. And there were a number of people that got back to us like fairly quickly and we're like, hey, sorry, we just can't do this right now. Like, super appreciate it, because like we have also been ghosted, and now it's like, where do I spend my time? If you can start narrowing it down, it at least helps you focus on who you're delivering to, and who you're trying to sign with.
Yeah, for sure. Man, there's so much stuff I want to talk about, but I can't. We can't talk about it
because of the secrecy.
I know the secrecy. So part of me loves the secrecy, and part of me hates it, because it's like I just want to talk about it.
How about this, Adam? If I may interrupt, Jay. When will things become less secret, or can you not say that?
I can't say the exact very soon, and I don't mean that as a joke, because we used to use that as a joke on the Mesa days of like everything was.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Soon TM.
Yeah, but we'll just say that the team is going to sleep very well this weekend, because we've been grinding on all the things. Like countdowns have started. Like there's lots. Of
interesting. Stuff going on. And grinding usually comes before some sort of important thing, doesn't it?
It sure does.
And good sleep also comes after the grind, and then before the important thing. I guess you could say, but I'm only speculating.
And read into that as you will, everyone. See if you can speculate.
Yeah, but that that it all ties back in, going back to the publisher thing of like, how are you doing your marketing stuff? And two of the points I have that I didn't cover of, like they have connections at places like Xbox and Game Pass, Epic Games. If they can shop your game around for those like types of, I don't want to call them exclusivity deals, because they're generally not too exclusive, but those types of deals. To get your game in, they have connections with influencers, which it's not the days of we're going to run some ads for your game and people are going to know about it. Like influencers are a huge part of it, whether you like that or not. I think it's very cool, but it's definitely like a different dynamic these days of like how you go out and like get your game to people using the influencer space and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I can speak to that slightly, because I am an influencer in that kind of way.
Yeah, we say it's creator now.
Yeah, creator,
content creator.
It is wild how much this kind of space has shifted, because you can spend like $10,000 running ads on bloody Twitter or YouTube and get a small percentage of a return. You can get an influencer excited about your project and have them cover it and see 100 times the return.
Yep.
But doing that in an organic way and not feeling like you're trying to sell something to them and stuff like that is very difficult, because inherently I get these emails, 10 times a day of people being like, hey, check out my thing. Like this is coming out. And even though you're coming from a genuine place of, I've made a thing, I'm super passionate about it, I want you, a creator I enjoy, to check it out. That initial email feels really corporate and kind of like icky. Like it feels gross. But building a relationship, like this is people's jobs on teams, like building relationships with influencers and like PR and stuff like that. So you can get them to do it. It's crazy how much has shifted.
Yeah, and it feels kind of dirty, and like you're shilling someone, and you can kind of, the number of Twitch streamers that I watch and stuff, like you can kind of tell when they're not super into something, but they're doing it. And I think the ones that I watch are they're fairly transparent. They're like, this isn't really the game for me, but I really appreciate the opportunity from X, Y, and Z to be able to do this. But like, you don't want to be in that scenario where somebody, you can kind of tell somebody's not really vibing with your game. Like ideally it all goes off with a hit, and you see like Lethal Company and Content Warning and like these games just like going absolutely viral, and like you hope for that, but like that's like lightning in a bottle. So like you have to try. I mean, that's part of your marketing campaign and just what you have to do to sell yourself.
There's a lot of money that goes towards this stuff. Paying for a video could easily be tens of thousands of dollars and beyond, right? And that's something that should be like illustrated, 20, 30, 40, 50K just to make a video and upload it to YouTube. Nobody would bat an eye at that. When you're talking about that level of money to get somebody to play a game, the people that are holding that money are going to do their research and say, wait, we're only going to give this to people to whom this is relevant. it'll happen where it's either a bad strategic decision or the exposure is just so high where they give it to somebody who it's out of your target audience, right? Just because that person streams so much, that person puts up so many good videos and they just get such great viewership. We just have to try. That definitely happens. But for the most part, like if you're giving away that much money, there has to be some sense to it. And it's I'm not saying it's always the best decision, but there's at least a strong motivation to spend the money wisely.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's due diligence too, of like if I spend a ton of money and I go to, my game's a shooter, but I go to an MMO content creator, like that's a bad call. So like, you can sort of play your odds in that regard as well.
Yeah. And by the way, like for all the pieces, it should be said, we keep alluding to it, but we know that there's publishers out there that don't have developers' interests in heart, best interests at heart, that are going to behave more selfishly or just make strategically poor decisions. I think a big thing that should be mentioned in this whole conversation is that it really comes down to the team. And when I say the team, I don't mean like the developer team. I mean the publisher, the partner team, and their leadership and collectively what their decisions are. It's not all publishers are greedy and not all publishers are magnanimous and just want to help you make your game. There's a lot of grayness, just like there would be in any other field. That's another piece that should be acknowledged. And within that, I'm curious, Adam, if there was, and obviously I don't want you to like say a name or something, but do you feel like you ever met someone who, you know what, if not they're greedy and they're trying to exploit us, you at least got a sense of like, no, that strategically that this might be a good fit and we like them, but their high level strategy is no good for us. I'm curious if that was ever someone that you met. Like, I don't even know why they're talking to us. What are they thinking? Did that ever come up?
No, we had, like I said, we had a couple of conversations that just didn't gel well for whatever reason. Maybe we can found a person on like an off day or whatever, but like I never got the feeling that like the business was leading it in the wrong direction or anything like that. With all in also what I should have let off with as well is like I am not a publishing expert. Like we've talked with people over the years, just to keep connections and see where things are going. We talked to a ton of people in order to sign the deal that we're in now, but like there's just so much to this field that like you could do it for years and decades and still not know the ins and outs of it, and it's constantly changing. So like just my point of view on it isn't necessarily the end all be all. And like I said, check out YouTubes and stuff for even more input because there's a ton of resources out there.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a great thing about game dev now, of course, is like even when it comes to the business side, there's going to be some resources for you. Like there's going to be some videos that'll help you understand all of this. And again, like it's not unique to this field, right? A lot of the things that you could find in plenty of other, I guess, like financial help resources or whatever, business help resources, they will be relevant to the company that you run that happens to make video games.
Yeah, and to go back to what you're saying earlier of like, if you're starting a project or looking to do something in the retail space, like start with an accountant, start with a lawyer. If you can't find a way or afford those things, like you can't do it. Like that, it's just a barrier, unfortunately, because like you're going to really hose yourself down the line if you're not prepared for the number of things that you need to have, especially if you're talking to publishers and like, oh, you're going to read a legal document and like understand it. Like, good luck. So yeah, making sure you have that infrastructure before you start taking these big steps is huge. And it's scary. Like you could be as prepared as humanly possible, and it's just terrifying. So like the more you can prepare yourself to be in a good position, the better. And it's something I would love to do more, whether it's podcasts like this or like pre-recorded YouTubes of like all the things we've learned over the years. Like we're a corporation now. Like I never thought the company would be a corporation. But like over the years, like we kept building these things and needing these things to go into place. So we needed business lawyers and we needed to change. First, we needed to construct an LLC so that we could, make money off of Steam. Then we needed to have a corporation for all the other businessy things that we were doing. We don't have investors, but like that's something we looked into as well. Like maybe we don't want to do a publisher. Maybe we want to have somebody invest in the company. So like anything, because there's a ton of resources out there, but it's not really specific to like building a business, building a team, and just highlighting like the mistakes we made and like hard lessons that we had along the way, because like, oh boy, there were so many of them. And like anybody that does this type of thing and says, no, it all went off without a hitch is lying to you, because this is very difficult.
Yeah, it's a chaotic mess, and it's lovely. And that's actually a good, it's not lovely. It's not only lovely. There's parts that are lovely, macro lovely, I guess. Ultimately lovely if you're lucky and you work real hard. But but it's kind of magnificent or beautiful or some sort of lofty word like that. Just how crazy it is, and how sometimes somehow awesome things do end up happening, getting released. Not everybody has that privilege. I was talking to a developer about this very recently. Like, not all the hard work you do gets to be seen by the world, and that's sad. But when it does work out, it's awesome. And even for the times where it doesn't, there's some great things to be taken from that too. But this is actually a good transition point, because I kind of wanted to touch on this a little bit and like shift over to Black Mesa specifically, like the project that brought you to the position where you are now. Black Mesa was a hell of a project, and it was, and I worked on it. So I'm speaking from my perspective, but of course you were there longer and are more involved. It was just fucking nutty, dude.
Yeah,
like I still, when I'm talking to people and they say, they'll say to me, like I'm talking to a prospective client or whatever, and they'll say, oh, so you're familiar with doing like this and this, or, oh, we kind of do things this way. I hope that's not a problem. And I'll go, well, I used to do game development through a message board, so I don't think that's going to be an issue.
Yeah. No, I was thinking of that
and shit like that. Yeah.
Thinking about what we would talk about today, I was thinking that exact same thing of like with that preamble I did of like my background, like me going from an artist to a lead artist to that was on a forum. Like Skype was around in those days, but it wasn't like, it was not, screen sharing was not what it is now. If I had to record like videos or something, I had to lower my screen resolution to like 640 by 480 or something so that my computer wouldn't die. Record that, upload it to some FTP or something, put the link onto the forums. People would have to download it and watch it. Like, just so many barriers to entry.
As an indie dev, I'm working with people all over the world, like with the Bog team, or on the unnamed project I'm working on. We heavily use like Perforce and stuff like that. And I'm trying to think of like, I'm doing a little bit of the communication stuff, but like you said, streams. Like I can stream my perspective. I'm like, I'm having a problem with this implementation. I'll go stream to the programmer and he'll fix it like that. Or like, just, hey, we have a new build. Like, just get from like Perforce.
Yep.
I'm forgetting how blissful that is compared to, like you said, uploading to a forum and just being like, please, someone look at this and check this thing.
It's not all bad either, because like it was just like everybody was doing it for fun. The money wasn't really into the equation or anything like that. There were still heated arguments and like, but it was all like passion and all of us working towards the same goal. So like we were, again, really fortunate to have that amount of it. But like even on the new project, we have automated build systems that like something gets checked into the project and the system automatically builds it to make sure it doesn't fail. And like that's already saved our lives like multiple times over.
Right.
So like just the progression and like the systems we've built over the years based on our experience is just, it's mind blowing. And to Mikee's point too, that the fact that any type of levels or art came together on the Black Mesa side is just a miracle. And were it not for the dedication of the team and like they want to get this thing that they love done, like it just would not have happened. And not to ramble, but it reminds me of two in college. I was working with Mikey and I's buddy Chuck, and he was interviewing a developer. I believe they were at Redstorm at the time. And they're like, you're working on this project called Black Mesa. Some people actually know about it. You have to make sure that it gets released. Like, doesn't matter if it's good or not. You have to make sure that it gets released. And that always really stuck with me, to make sure that it gets out into the world. And it's important in game design at all. Like, even if you don't think it's perfect, send it out to the world and then move on to the next thing, because not everybody has the luxury of working on a project for 15 years and having it be successful. Like you need to find a good stopping point. The perfect is the enemy of the good. Get your project out there, learn your lessons, and move on. And
when did Black Mesa start development? Maybe we should make that clear to everybody who's watching.
Yeah, it's 2004 was when there were two mod teams, and they realized they were both kind of working towards the same goal. And at the first, they were just putting in high-res textures, updating a model. There really wasn't a plan, I don't think, to go in and like redesign the whole game. And after those projects merged, it became Black Mesa Source at the time, and then the sort of the guiding principle became to create Half-Life as if Valve had made it in the current day. So taking all the lessons from Half-Life 2 and all the design methodology, and Half-Life 1's a brilliant game. Like another video I would love to do is just like, not that nobody's ever done it before, but like a breakdown of what made that game so successful. But it definitely shows its age, and there are definitely things I think Valve themselves have evolved into that we wanted to sort of leverage and put into the game while still staying true to its roots. So like you were talking about earlier, of like anytime you take a well-regarded IP and try and do your own spin on it, it's extremely dangerous. So we sort of had to walk that line. And I don't think we were too insecure about many of the changes we made to Earthbound, because we had that guiding principle of like, I really think this is what Valve would do, how they would evolve the mechanics. The Zen stuff was completely different, and we definitely had a lot of constructive criticism after that was all done. But yeah, to wrap it up, 2004 is when it all started, and then it sort of like evolved over time into this much more robust, dedicated project.
That was something that because I came onto the project, geez, it must have been like what, 2015? Right before, it was before the early access.
Yeah, 2015 is when we launched, so it's probably 2014, somewhere in there.
Okay, so 2014, and the part that you said about, I definitely got the rowdiness. That part I collected, because we're all modders, right? But now it's going to get commercial, so let's get serious. And the passion and the kind of vision that you just described for the project of like, well, what if it was Half-Life in modern day, the new lessons learned, the higher production value, rawly just what we could do graphically now versus what you couldn't do in 1998. And I remember being appreciative of that environment, because I remember coming in and I was doing writing and narrative design and voiceover right for the HECU Marines. And I thought, we've got all this excellent stuff that I assume Ben Truman wrote himself, and then he designed himself, narratively speaking, for like the scientists and the guards, because we couldn't call them all Barneys, I guess, so we took them guards. And I thought, like, you guys got to do this for the Marines, and I pushed for that, and it was something that you guys were open to, and that was something that I really appreciated, and it's something that is special in a team culture, and I guess it comes from a real deep passion for the source material, where I basically just had to like advocate for this, like, hey, let's not just have the Marines do their Half-Life 1 scenes, but shifted to fit the vision that you just described. But let's push into it more. Let's add some new scenes. How about this? How about this? And something that not all teams will do is be welcome to that kind of thing. That was something that I always appreciated working with you guys, and it just spoke to the good, again, the passion, the team culture there.
Yeah, the team is very good at developing things like that. I said the perfect is the enemy of good, and I say that on repeat with our team. Like I often say our team is too good at design, because we're like, oh, what if we did this, it would be even better, but if we did this, it'd be even better. And like, yeah, that's true, but we have timelines as well, so like they know what it takes to make a game that really is good and hits on all cylinders, but you have to work within the realms of possibility. And a lot of that we learned on Mesa, like getting our ducks in a row, so that after we went retail, it didn't take another 10 years, even though it did take a long time. And I can't stress enough, like how many, to put it bluntly, things we did wrong throughout the entire game. But like just being open to like, we think this is how it would have played out had Valve done it themselves. Like the scene that you did in the Surface Tension Uncut, where you over the radio you can hear the Marines bleeding out. He's reaching for his iPad, that's one of my favorite parts in the game.
Thank you, man.
It's just like something that we added in there, and if you run by, you miss it. But if you're paying attention, you get this whole other backstory. And let me just tangent again to like one of the biggest things that makes Half-Life feel real is that there's always a little like cracked doorway that you can see more of the facility. There's always like a loader that's walking off into the distance, and it makes the environment feel so much bigger than it actually is. And having that radio call out of like, there's a combat going on somewhere I can't even see, and there's a Marine dying, like that's what builds the world and makes the Black Mesa Research Facility feel real. So like always look for that. And it doesn't have to be like over engineered. It could be, like I said, like just a closet that's peeked open and a shelf is blocking it and you can see more of that, but you can't get there. Like that's just huge for building a world.
It's those...
I really appreciate you saying that, man, because that scene is like some of my, I'm the kind of, that's like top 5 game development things I'm most proud of. Yeah. Because even if I didn't like it, there's like there's at least 2 really well produced fan animations depicting that scene that happened like
that's awesome.
Off on the radio. Yeah. And they've got like hundreds of thousands of views. And that was just wild to me. I only discovered that last year, and it came at a good time because it was after I just got laid off by Meta. Yeah. I thought like, you know what? I think I did a good thing. That must have resonated with some people. And it came from like a realistic space. It came from me talking to my mom, who's an ICU nurse, and saying, Mom, like if somebody got this kind of injury, say from an alien on their leg, where do you put the tourniquet? And she's like, oh, hand's length above the wound. And that's, you know, I tried to bring, just like you guys had brought so much authenticity before I came there to like the scientist dialogue and all that kind of thing. I wanted to bring that to the Marines. And that was, I think when people play Black Mesa and they say like, oh, this is the modern way to play it, it's because not only do we, you know, let you, I think you described it very well, peer through the filing cabinet, the corner there and see like, oh, look, there's a world that I can't get to, but I see it. Not only do we do that, but like the authenticity of the dialogue itself, or the believability, I guess you could say, was an important factor of that as well, because it was nicely contrasted with all the craziness of like, how do you actually deal with this portal to another dimension and these creatures spilling through? It was really a cool project.
Yeah. All it takes is just like viewing or hearing one of those details once within an experience for it to make every subsequent appearance of those details to grab you, right? Because like you said, people could just walk past and not pay attention to these things, and I'm sure a lot of players do in a lot of cases, but you get that one spark, and then every other radio call that comes in or split open door is just like, oh, what am I going to see now? What am I going to get to experience? Yeah, that is crazy. And like those details are so impressive to me. Like, do you think that without the collective passion, because obviously it started from, you know, being a collective mod space, without the passion of that original IP, do you guys think you'd be able to put up with the hardships of effectively creating a game over a forum over those years? Is that something that gave you guys that spark?
And that sort of, it was kind of like game design with training wheels on, and it's not to discount like the hard work everybody did, but like when you have this, especially for the Earthbound levels, we had this template and we knew we could build upon it. And it's kind of interesting going back to Half-Life now, because you see the differences in the spaces and like what we put into it. Like I had forgotten how small the rocket launch sequence was in OAR in the original Half-Life. But it at least gave a starting point of like, we knew we had this sort of pseudo blast pit that this rocket was going to come out of and like shoot up into the sky. So like we were able to build around that. And when you're building your own game, your own IP, like you don't have any of that scaffolding. It's really tough. And I think you see a lot of success with games that sort of build off of like establish that scaffolding early. Like I know you had a developer on from Trepang too, and like I imagine, and this is just me completely guessing, I imagine they took a lot of scaffolding from Fear to make sure that they could nail the vision of their game. And like nobody docks them points for referencing Fear. Like everybody should reference Fear. It's a great game. But it helped them to deliver a game that was really successful.
It can also be
I think he'll like that you said that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's Wilson Chung. Yeah, he's the lead. It's a very small team. It's like 4 people, I think. And it's important. Who was it? Fucking Isaac Newton, whoever said it. It's standing on the shoulders of giants, right? We all inspire each other. We all lift each other up, and that stuff is what's cool about the field. But anyway, Jay, go ahead.
Well, it's I completely agree. It's a sense of doing that and having that initial spark to take some scaffolding, like you said, Adam, can also be a marketing hook.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is just like, I can't remember the name of it, but we were talking about it ages ago, Mikey. It was basically Morrowind, but
Dread Delusion.
Yeah, like, and how you described it was, oh well, it's just Morrowind, but more. And
I feel a little
like,
bad
that's
about that
the hook,
comparison, by the way, because as I read more into it, I'm like, oh no, there's some other cool shit to this. However,
but that's the hook, right?
Yeah,
that's the hook.
Exactly. Yes, it's just like you were talking about hooks earlier. Like if that, well, I think they got published by Dread XP. I don't know, but if I had to guess, that team lead or that leadership, when they were making their pitch deck, they probably said like Morrowind with but it's a broken magical world, low fidelity, yada yada. There's a lot of pieces there that, even though we make these comparisons, what was the famous gaming journalist one? It's like Far Cry with guns, or excuse me, it's Oblivion with guns is Far Cry. I forget, something like that. We kind of laugh at those, but there's a reason why that sort of condensed message is useful. It's because, one, like, it helps you describe your inspiration, and it's fine to be inspired by another project, but also it just helps you like get a snapshot of the project, because other people know nothing about it and you know everything, and you kind of get that snapshot.
Yeah,
like
there are no new ideas.
And it's okay to blend genres. I mean, that's so many different games are just like, well, we took a little bit of this and we took a little bit of this and we smashed them together, or maybe 5 things and you smash them together. And that's
a pie chart in our publisher pitch.
There was absolutely a pie chart
from, like that just part of the process.
I almost reflexively asked, "Oh, and what did it say?" But I guess you can't, because that would be too revealing.
Hey, Adam, why don't you just read through your pitch deck for us?
Oh,
just
do
some ASMR pitch deck.
We will. Jay and I will role play some disinterested, detached executives.
Yes.
That you have to. I'm gonna pick up my phone. I'm gonna be texting in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Ask me if we can put NFTs into it. That'd be great.
Oh, do you have any sort of Web3 elements going on here?
God damn. It makes me ill. Makes me ill sick.
Oh, we've lost the thread fully now.
Yeah, who am I?
I was talking about, here, let's come back. Your room is awesome. I'm obviously a Half-Life dork, and I just love what you've done with the place. It is that Half-Life orange. If the passion of the Black Mesa team was not yet clear, take a look behind Adam. For those of you who can't see, there's did you look up the RGB value for fucking Gordon's suit in determining the paint color there?
It's I don't know if it's Gordon's suit, but it's the dev texture color for the Hammer editor. It's the gray that you use for the dev textures. And I've been meaning for years to get my buddy has a vinyl shop, and I want to get like a 512 or something to put in the corner. Just the lettering that's on the dev textures. Yeah, if you look at the dev textures, it's a 512 by 512, and it has it in the corner. So like only nerds would know, but it's
that's so cool.
I love orange and gray.
Nerdy detail. I live for that shit, dude.
Yeah,
so good.
Let's talk about this. What's the worst? I'm going to ask you a tough question. This is something that I discussed with you guys at Steam Dev Days in 2014. What's the worst part of Half-Life 1?
Ooh, that is.
Here we go. And don't say Zen. Something else that's bad.
Yeah,
because everybody says like, "Oh, Zen, they didn't have enough time yet," and we know that from the documentary. What's the worst part of Half-Life 1 besides Zen?
So I think OAR stands out as being a little bit confusing.
What's OAR for people who don't know?
Thank you. On a rail. Stands out just because it's a little bit confusing, but it has a kick-ass gimmick of you shoot an arrow and now it changes the track direction so that your tram goes around. So like I think that sort of pulls it out of the like bad space, because the gimmick is so good, and like I remember vividly just being super young and like redirecting that tram and enjoying that so much. I think probably what puts people off in a modern context is the tram ride into Black Mesa, and it does all those important things that we talked about earlier of like establishing this facility and making it feel real, but it's just a bit too long. And I think a lot of people lose interest in the game because they tram ride in, they get these cool vistas. Now they're in the AM anomalous materials labs, and they have to go around and there's fun stuff to find, but you have to seek it out yourself. a lot of times players go the wrong direction, and the airlock guard's like, nope, you got the wrong airlock, Mr. Freeman. And I think people just lose it there. And I've seen it on Reddit with our game too, of like, this game's boring. Like, why are people playing this? And like, I think that's probably in the modern context what is a barrier to entry for like a fantastic game.
First time user experience is extremely important, especially in a new IP. Like it can be really tough, not just tutorialization, but narrative introduction and exposition and stuff like that. It's super difficult.
We're not the first to say it. I'm sorry. I was just gonna say real quick. We're not the first to say it, but like Half-Life 1 was a very deliberate like subversion of the games before it. You were not the Space Marine. You were not the Doom Marine. You were going to work as a scientist. You were an assistant, I think. Like you weren't even a team leader. And that subversiveness was a nice hook for people who are like, whoa, like I'm actually in a world instead of just running through the corridors. And there's all these other pieces that helped it too. It was modern for one. Like that was a little unexpected. And then, but in a modern context, I see what you're saying, where like that could just be perceived as like, oh, this is kind of boring. Like I just don't know where I'm supposed to be. But that's all I was going to say. Go ahead, Adam.
Exactly to your point, like attention spans have gone significantly down since the 90s. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Like we're taking in information and processing things much faster than like the generations before us. So like we have to adapt to that. We have to accommodate that. And it's like I said, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Everybody looks at the generation that comes after them and is like, oh, those damn kids. But like if you look at like zoom way out, like year over year, decade over decade, like the world is getting better and like people are getting better at things. So like my little optimist pitch there of like, these are good things. It's kind of a pain in the ass to design too. And you know, going back to the Game Pass thing too, is like, there are so many options for players out there right now. Like if you don't hook them right out of the gate, they're just going to go to the next game that they already have for free on Game Pass or what have you. So like Jay was saying, that the first time user experience, onboarding players, making sure they understand the systems is like insanely critical to having a successful game.
I think I see what you mean as far as talking about the attention span shift. To me, it's a little less about that, because I feel like there are gamers out there who really enjoy the sort of patient, slow burn that both Black Mesa and Half-Life 1's start are. I guess the problem is now what makes it different from the 90s to me is it's less about the shift in attention span, and it's more about the pacing and gameplay that you get from a game like Black Mesa would specifically not be expected in like a first person action game. You'd expect it in some other genre. And that's the kind of piece that, instead of it being like groundbreaking in the late 90s, now it's just kind of like, oh, but this is like a fast-paced action shooter. Why am I just kind of fucking around a bit? I'm not really here for story. But players who are there for that are maybe playing other more, I don't know, walking sim inspired games and stuff where they're specifically just supposed to walk around and take stuff in.
That's
but I suppose the attention span. Yeah, I mean, I would say it's more attributed to that than like a shift in attention span, because there's totally still players to me that like slower games like that, right? They're just not necessarily playing action or arcade shooters, which Half-Life and Black Mesa kind of are. That's how I would define it, at least.
Genres, man. This is why I kind of love and hate genres, because you can communicate so much information by saying FPS, right?
Yeah.
But that also sets up expectations of like in Half-Life's case, does have a slower opening and is more about, you know, its narrative delivery and stuff like that. So somebody can be like, I'm going to go play this FPS, and immediately be like, oh, I'm not immediately shooting someone, I'm going to turn this off, right?
Yeah.
But would they have even started to play if they didn't know it was an FPS in the first place, right? Like, we need these things, but they can also constrain and set up not incorrect, but false expectations. We just hope that our FTUX is enough to grab a player if they're that way inclined, right? God, it's difficult. I'm going to make an episode on first time user experience, because it's rough, man. It's super rough.
It's true. Now I'm thinking about games. I'm challenging my own thought here, and I'm thinking about games that like had a slow burn FPS start. Prey, the new Prey, that was like a good one that compelled you because at the end of the day, also you are just going to work. But it's even worse than just going to work. You're just taking part in a boring experiment. That's that's what the beginning of Prey is. I think it's Half-Life is sort of. But
totally.
it doesn't stay boring for long.
Yeah. Breaking that window though is like one of my favorite gaming moments, like of all time. I absolutely adore that.
Yeah, this is
so good.
From an 8-year-old game.
Yeah.
Oh shit!
So good.
It's been 8 years already.
I think it came out in 2016.
Bloody Prey! How dare you?
Yeah,
so old.
I know it happens to us all.
What?
Yeah,
I might be forgetting. What happened to that team? Didn't they?
Oh,
did that team get shut down, or are they working on something else?
It was Arcane Austin.
It was Arcane Austin.
Yeah.
Tragic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sucks. It really does.
Yeah.
But you can't. It takes time to build great things. You do great things, and I guess nothing lasts forever. That's the shitty interpretation, but that's the way I kind of rationalize it in my head. Like, you can't have winners forever, and sometimes you commit in certain ways, or you have a bad release, and then bad shit can happen as a result of this. So
maybe
what are you gonna do?
Maybe Prey will be remembered even more fondly because there wasn't a sequel, and there wasn't something that could either push it in a new direction. Maybe it will just be remembered as that, beautiful little gem that was the one shot.
We got to give that team credit because I'm looking at it now and holy shit, they made great games. Arx Fatalis, Dark Messiah, both the Dishonored games, and then Prey, some other Dishonored stuff, Wolfenstein, Deathloop, and Redfall. Like, they were trying to do unique IPs. They weren't getting stuck into one spot. They took some risks there. So that's another piece of the discourse around, I think, the games that followed Dishonored. They need credit for that. Go ahead.
Yeah, what team is making the Blade game? I thought it was the guys who made Dishonored were making that.
Marvel's Blade?
I think it was like from the team who made Dishonored were making a Blade IP game that was meant to be Dishonored but Blade, which is the hook.
French studio.
Arcane Leon.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was the guys who made Dishonored.
Well, they might have been. Hold on, I'm looking at it now. They might have shifted team over, or both teams worked on it.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, maybe chat will.
We'd have to see.
Chat will know.
Yeah,
chat will.
I'm pretty sure there's a lot of co-development going on between those studios.
Yeah,
it would make sense.
And that's
I think their DLCs for Prey were actually really well regarded as well. And
I still have to play Moonfall.
Yeah,
thank you for reminding me. I'm gonna write that down right now. Thank you, Adam.
Of course.
God, sorry.
To your point, and it's certainly not to blame the players, because people should play what they're interested in and what really resonates with them. But like, studios take chances on new IPs and stuff, and then players don't always play them. So like, we get lost in our own little bubble of like, oh, they're making another sequel. It's like, yeah, but then I didn't play the latest. I didn't play Deathloop, even though I love that studio. So like, I think we have to take more chances as video game players and be more involved in that and sort of support the things we want to see, even if maybe they don't hit 100%. It's tough.
As tough as the space is, I'm hopeful for it, because as much as it sucks when people get laid off and studios dissolve, the hope, and this is like the silver lining. Obviously, I'm not saying it's good that these things happen, but those are talented people, full stop. Yeah. And if they decide to stay in the field, then they go somewhere else. They bring the talent somewhere else. They say, fuck it, now's the time for me to take a risk and form my own studio, or form this studio with my friends, or do solo dev. And it's also helping this situation is like, it's, in my opinion, like never been easier to make a game, right? Like the tutorials are there, the engines are there, yada, yada. I'm sure I've said this ad nauseum on here all the time, but that's the silver lining here, is like those people, the creativity is still there. As gamers, we just have to be patient, and we just got to keep sifting, because that's the thing about gaming now, is like it's so saturated. Like, there's some great projects, maybe you get lucky and you go viral, but you do kind of need to be found in some sense. And as players, do the dive, like start looking. You might find something that you like, and not just on Steam, maybe on other platforms too.
Yeah, one of my favorite games ever got a 6.4 on IGN back in the day. It's called Hidden and Dangerous, and like game, I love that game. I had so much fun with it, and it like, I looked at the screenshots. I think there was a video at the time, and I was just like, oh, you know what? I think I'm going to try this game because it looks like exactly what I want. It's like a 10 out of 10 for me. And I don't fault IGN as much of a punching bag as they've become these days, but like it's not for everybody. But the screenshots look cool to me, so I dove in on it, and I try and do that more often as well because I'm with limited time. It's really hard to take those chances. But yeah, like the payoff that you can get, even if you get a couple of games that don't resonate with you, if you find that one that's underrated but is exactly what you were looking for, like that's what makes it worth it.
Adam, we got to play Hidden and Dangerous together. I've tried to get that game working in the past before, and I also had nobody to play it with. I love
what is it?
You say that.
Can you describe it to me?
Yeah, it's a World War II tactical shooter. So you have a squad. It's kind of like I'm still going way back. If you remember the original Ghost Recon, it's kind of like that, but set in World War II, and you can hop between your units. You can overhead plan with your units. You can set up your machine gunner to like cover this field of fire. They had a ton of mechanics. Like in one of the missions, you're behind enemy lines in France, and you got to steal clothes off a clothesline to blend in so that the Germans don't see you. Like totally ahead of its time. One of them, you hop into, I think it's a B-24 Liberator, and like you leave the area like shooting the 50 cals off of the side of the Liberator as it flies off, and the Germans are like sweeping in at you. Yeah, I see the video up on the stream. Like, don't let its age fool you. It is an extremely interesting game. The controls are rough, like a lot of those games of that era. But oh man, it is ahead of its time.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
I think it's also worth noting, speaking of like teams and their hit, Eric brought up, oh, fuck yeah, thank you, Eric.
Yeah.
By the way, it's not to be confused with Armed and Dangerous, which is a hilarious game, but very different. Yep. And Hidden and Dangerous, that team went on to make, Hidden and Dangerous 2 and stuff, but also Mafia.
Oh,
it's Czech studio. Cool. Yep. Yeah, so that's when you're playing Mafia, you're playing the work of a team that cut its teeth on, I'm looking now, couple MS-DOS games, and then Hidden and Dangerous in 1999. Yeah, and then in 2002 they made Mafia. So cool. Pretty different. And one of the nice things about Hidden and Dangerous is like, and I'm sure I've complained about this, even though I kind of participate in it. A lot of tactical shooters are about sort of obsessing over and fetishizing the aesthetic of the operator and the tactical shooting, or they only have like the high lethality gunplay, and that's enough to be a tactical shooter. This game doesn't have that because it's the Second World War. We didn't have that sort of, I guess that's when commandos were starting to get hot and shit. But you know what I mean? It doesn't have the modern fetishization. It's all about the gameplay, and it's really hard. But then there's some cinematic moments too, like Adam was kind of describing. It's a really cool project.
Yeah, great game.
All right. Before we we would usually get into our improv section now with Tina, which Tina would have prepped, but Tina couldn't be here unfortunately today. But we do have one. We do have one that we were gonna use a while back that we didn't, so we'll reuse that. But before I get to that, we do have a donation from Dark Jackal. We'll give him $5. Thank you. It says, thanks for the convo. It's been an interesting perspective. On a different note, any new games inspiring you lately?
Ooh, that is a fantastic question. Whenever we're doing stuff, we're always playing games and looking at how they come together. Let me look at my to play list.
Here's how authentic it's going to be, because Adam's going to his to play list.
Yeah,
there we go. It's because this is the shit. When I just said like, oh, I have to, and I was wrong. I think it's called Moon Crash, the Prey expansion.
Yeah,
thank you for the person who
Moonfall was the terrible movie that recently came out.
Oh, okay, yeah. I had to go and write that down real quick because I have a bunch of. I think many gamers have this. We have games on our list, and then there's the inspiration section, and then the fun section. For me at least, I have one of those. Sometimes they cross over.
A favorite, a to play section. The to play section is getting massive. Helldivers is obviously huge. I think everybody's been, sort of referencing that in the industry of how do you have a live service model game that doesn't feel like it's trying to sell you at every corner? And I think they nailed it. And Sony did their best to try and torpedo that project, but they, in general, like it just brilliantly handled game design and rollout of post-release content that people were excited about. And like the game loop is just so solid, and the events that they do are just really interesting and fun. I have Pacific Drive on my to play list. I have not played it yet, but like that game kind of gets me excited to make my own games because it just seems like it's so different and sort of like that sci-fi post-apocalyptic vibe that resonates with like the Half-Life audience.
Yeah.
Left 4 Dead is still huge. And just in terms of like we were talking about onboarding and stuff, like that game is like the perfect way to get into something, and like it's not a overly complex game, but like every mechanic you can learn in that and utilize later and sort of level yourself up. There's depth to it without it being just a brick wall right out of the start, like an Escape from Tarkov or something like that.
Yeah, that's a very good. Tarkov is a good comparison, of course, of just like the high barriers to entry and to continue having fun with it. Left 4 Dead was simple but at depth.
Yeah, and the last thing I just saw in my list, and I don't want this to sound like I think too highly of myself, but like the Resident Evil 2 remake, somebody described it to me as like, I imagine that this remake is how people felt when they played Black Mesa, and like, I couldn't have put it better than myself, because when I went into that, it's like, this is how I remember Resident Evil 2. I know it didn't look like this on the PlayStation, but it was just a core roots. Like they understood what Resident Evil 2 was, and then just vastly improved on it. And I still want to go back and play the original because I just played it so much as a kid. But yeah, that game was awesome and sort of in line with like the stuff we were talking about with Black Mesa of like, how do you take this really beloved thing and try and improve upon it?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's a very good shout right there. I felt genuinely scared and tense when I played that game. Great pacing. Also, like simple design that has some depth, I guess, like strategically planning out your inventory and stuff and making split-second decisions of like, do I sacrifice the knife or the grenade to get out of this situation? How much health do I have? All those things are like, I don't know, the design felt very elegant. Like those were simple decisions, but they presented them in a way that made all of them feel meaningful, and they were meaningful to the gameplay.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine how challenging it was to design that game, because there were multiple points where I was like on the razor's edge of like being soft locked because I just didn't have enough resources to take on what they were throwing at me. Excuse me, but I got through it. Like, so either they're doing some smart stuff behind the scenes to make sure that you have equipment, or I just got lucky, but I'm willing to bet that was a huge design challenge for them and something they really spent a lot of time on to make sure players got through the game.
Yeah, the genre is so tough to like just balance. Like I can't imagine doing testing on that game and just being like, oh my god, like how do we tweak this to make this one hallway manageable, but also keep that tension. Survival horror is just absolutely wild. Mikey, what about you? What's the game that's been inspiring you recently?
I feel very inspired by. I guess this sounds funny because I'm Half-Life gushing right now, but it's not only for that. I'll give another one to balance it out. Abiotic Factor is a very inspiring survival crafting game. Yeah. I think what that team has done, like, I don't think I would have expected it to be possible to make such a good survival crafting game that took place entirely indoors, but they have an excellent atmosphere. The whole premise is like, it's kind of just Half-Life, and they know this, and this is like a part of what their inspiration is themselves, but you're in a secret facility, and people from the aliens, I guess not technically aliens, creatures from another dimension come in, and the military comes in, and all these different, I don't know if they're technically military, they're more paramilitary, but all these people come into the facility, and instead of being like Gordon Freeman, who is very martial and great with shotguns for some reason, and his HEV suit, you're just like a guard or a scientist, and instead of like having to escape the facility through like a 1 to 8 hour linear FPS experience, you're just trying to survive. So you're tearing up bed sheets, you're scavenging around for food to cook, you're like finding a little kitchenette area somewhere else in the facility, in the cafeteria, cooking your food, and then running back to your base, which is like outside the bathrooms, and it smells because there's poop in like there's all these different and you actually poop in the game, by the way, which is very realistic and appreciated. But there's all these different What's that? It's a poop sim.
Poop sim.
Yeah,
Love it.
and the poop that you cut, because it's a survival game and everything should have like or it's nice to have some sort of use for your waste, I guess. It's nice to have like a lot of itemization and mechanics that fit into that. You can actually poop into a bag and use it as fertilizer to grow and survive longer in the facility.
No mechanic wasted.
Exactly. Yeah, and that the way they managed to take that setting, which is like cool to me because I like Half-Life and stuff, but also just like being an indoor survival crafting game and answering that question and still having the vibe of like when you go out in a survival crafting game and you're like deep in the caves in Minecraft or whatever, and you're like, fuck, I'm not going to make it back. I'm going to die out here. You get that in this game. And you're like, which corridor? How do I get back? You're lost in the cave maze that is this research facility. And they did a great job at that. So I found that very inspiring for sure.
Sounds great.
To go back to our comparisons, if you like Valheim and if you like Half-Life, that is like perfectly made for you. It's a really I only played the beta, but it was fantastic.
Nice.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. What about you, Jay? What's inspired you recently?
Oh, motherfucker. Mine's a bit of a cop-out. So my second favorite game of all time recently got well, I guess it's just a port really, which I've been waiting for years, which is Red Dead Redemption. And man, that game, it's taken me back to a time of, you know, just simplicity of just like, I guess just the idea of like there being cheats. The goals of the game are extremely simple. The narrative is delivered in a very simple way. And I remember playing the online so much and just having these memories of going after cosmetics, but them all being tied to progression. And like the time I've invested in the golden weapons and everything. And it just really took me back to a time where it was just like, the stuff I get from the game is based on what I put into it rather than the amount of money I put into it. And it just, I really want that. And also just the fact that I'm waiting to finish the main campaign before I go to it. But the idea of having DLCs with Undead Nightmare that are just campy and completely different and like not connected to some, you know, higher level think piece. It's just here's a fun thing we wanted to do as a team and we think you'll like go. It's really taking me back to like it's taking me back to and I know this isn't right, but like a simpler time. And it's inspiring me with some of the games I'm creating, especially considering one of them is multiplayer and has cosmetics and stuff like that. It's really inspiring me of like how do we do these things? How do I want the player to feel about acquiring these things and stuff like that? So it is a new game technically, but it is just a port basically.
Well, how do you maintain? It's a good inspiration, at least what I'm hearing from you, is like you look at that and you go, okay, yeah, how do we maintain theme? How do we maintain atmosphere and not break that in this project I'm working on? Why not look back to a time when we were like more disconnected from the monetization efforts that always at least have a risk of harming the aesthetic of your game, etc. That's a good place from which to draw inspiration, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's just memories, right? Because why it's my second favorite game of all time is not specifically the main campaign, which is fantastic, and also Undead Nightmare, but the multiplayer I played so much of. And it was like, well, what kept me hooked about that? Like, why did I care? And it's because they're prestige systems. Like you could look at someone and tell how much time they put into the game, not how much money they'd spent. Oh, they've got the whale skin. Oh, cool. Like, wow, they have money. It was, if you saw someone on like a zebra, you'd be like, well, I can't remember. It was like prestige level 5 or something. You would have played the game X amount of times, gone through the leveling system, and you'd be like, I don't want to mess with them because they clearly have put a lot of time into the game. Just from like a skin or golden guns requiring X amount of headshots. Like I had all of the golden guns, and that was a point of pride for me because it was a grind, but I had to go through that, and I knew that was visible to other players in the game, and I got this kind of sense of I don't know, pride from being like, I don't know, it was like, and I remember that, and I think maybe I'm remembering it wrong because the online isn't included obviously with this remaster, but it's really taken me back to that, and I'm like, that felt great. And I know there is, but there's a way to monetize an experience, but also have that at the same time. And how do you do that? And how do you balance that? That's the dilemma I'm kind of going over in my head. Not saying that our game is going to have monetized cosmetics. Just a thought experiment, you know.
Oh, I think we're kind of on the same page there, and I fully recognize that I'm getting older and like games aren't necessarily built for my demographic, but I do think the industry is going to swing a bit back more to what you're saying of like the simplified game loops and just sort of letting players go in and have experiences with their buddies and not get sold to at every corner. And like I said, Helldivers has shown us that you can do it the right way, still make money, still have a good game. I think people are really, even like I was just talking with my buddy earlier this morning about the first Warzone and how much simpler it was back then. And like I appreciate that the games need to progress and you can't keep selling the same game, because we'd complain about that too. But yeah, it's just I want to have more of that setup of like there's this world and I can explore it with my friends and maybe have a unique experience, and that water cooler moment of like a thing that happened, and not have it be pure intensity all the time.
For sure, 100%.
Yeah, I forgot to say my other balancing one.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Alpha Protocol.
Oh,
playing that recently. Yeah. Inspiring. You can have great writing and an in-depth RPG style story that's not in a fantasy or weird sci-fi setting. You can have it actually in a place that's great for it, which is like the world of espionage and intelligence work. And it doesn't have to feel too esoteric mechanically. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the gameplay in Alpha Protocol. I think it's very much of the time, but I really like how it was written and how the narrative design was with the choices that you make and the effects that you see. That was another one. And then some of the stuff that the sim genre is doing is also pretty inspiring and cool, because they're pulling in other elements from other games. Contraband Police been playing, and having a game that is as multifaceted as, like, you're not just doing the Papers, Please sim thing, or you're not just driving the truck, Euro trucks, seemingly. Like the genre has come so far. We're defending the border in actual FPS combat from rebels. We're driving our prisoners around like an open map to jail and then coming back. There's a really cool genre pulling into of that genre that's happening right now.
Wow,
that's awesome.
I've never even heard of that game. That looks really interesting.
Yeah, both are cool. But anyway, go ahead. That was to balance out my Half-Life fanboyness with Abiotic Factor.
Hey, you always got to balance it out. It's appreciated.
I talk too much about it.
No, never too much. So the question is, does anybody have a hard out at a specific time? Because I don't want to keep people locked in, because we might want to do our improv thing, but if people have a hard out, then it's all good.
I'm good.
I
got like 15, 20 more minutes actually.
All right, we can probably get an improv.
I think we could do it. Yeah.
Let's do it. All right, let's just keep an eye on our times. And what was it, 3 p.m. Eastern? We'll call it. Okay, so we have one that Tina prepped months ago that we didn't end up using, but I think might be interesting for our specific conversation. So Eric, would you be able to pull up the image for me? Okay, so what Tina had prepped was, considering this as a horror game, 4 billionaires just went to space and did a spacewalk. How can we make a horror game about billionaires going to space?
For people who can't see or understand, like, this is the segment of our show where Tina will present us with something, an image or a video, and a premise, and then say, pitch a game about this. So we see it's very well produced, this video, and their spacesuits, like, very futuristic and cozy and nice. And here they are, they're lifting off on the rocket, and those are the rich billionaires, I assume?
I assume so, yes. It's what was provided by Tina. So can we create a potentially, I'm going to say, multiplayer, if we got 4 billionaires and we were sending 4 people to space? Do a spacewalk? How can we transform this mechanically and narratively into a horror game? I think from their perspective, maybe
the economy crashes back on Earth, and what can they do from the space station to protect their riches while they're floating in space?
Did they bring their wealth with them a bit? I feel like their wealth needs to be expressed somehow mechanically. I don't know what
True.
they could do up there with it. The size of the bunk, yeah. But I like that it's horror, and yeah, I like the idea that they're isolated. Their wealth could also just not be relevant to them anymore. The pillars here are horror and multiplayer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm immediately thinking of, I don't know if this is an angle we want, but games like Phasmophobia, Forewarned, Lethal Company, 4-player co-op horror. Something's on the ship that came from Earth, the thing that killed Earth. But I feel like we could go deeper with that. And we have to use that these people are billionaires somehow, right?
Mm-hmm.
There has to be some kind of expression there.
I like, so this is off the, while you guys think of the billionaire aspect, I'm trying to think, okay, so what is the horrifying thing about potentially, well, not necessarily being trapped, but being forced to stay in space? And for me, the void of space is the most terrifying part. And I think we could do some like kind of survival crafting multiplayer aspects of, you have to leave the safety of the pod or the space station and do a spacewalk and effectively fish for space debris to be able to get things to craft. So there's the risk of being out there, and maybe we have some resource management of being out, certain levels of oxygen. There being hazards out with space debris and things flying around, and your tether maybe being cut and jettison off into space and stuff. I think there's some interesting things we could do with that. Like, imagine being out on the spacewalk and seeing in orbit a really valuable piece of space debris coming, and you have to like communicate with people like, this is coming, this is where it is, we have to try and get this right because this is going to be really useful to us.
Maneuver to
building this piece of tech. I think that could be interesting.
Fish that is, I really like that idea, and especially like, not every game has to have a message or a moral, if you will, but like space debris is like a legit concern. It's like becoming a bigger and bigger issue as we have more of these things that are becoming obsolete and really no way to take care of them. So like, it is really interesting that there's hardware out there. Why don't we repurpose it to solve a problem?
Hardware and dangers, and that observational gameplay of being able to spot things, which is, in my opinion, going to be quite difficult to visualize, because spotting stuff on a black background that has lots of white dots all over it and seeing small specks moving and being able to identify what they are. You could also have a system of like, there's a space debris, people who go out on the spacewalks and are effectively fishing or netting specific aspects, but also people on an observation deck who are monitoring it and being able to, they can have tech that allows them to spot things. Yeah, like, in this kind of region, this is coming towards us. You guys need to get in position and do this. And having that cross communication, I think, could be really interesting.
I'm trying to build the pitch deck in my head, which we will need when we try to find our publisher, which Adam helps with. So it's great. And I think it's kind of like a mashup of Space Engineers and The Raft is what I'm sort of imagining. You guys know in The Raft, you start with a shitty little raft and you're slowly building it out. That's what I'm imagining. The survival craftingness coming through of like you're in space, you're starting with the station and you're building out the station itself. The horror, to me, it's becoming a lot like a spacey, also Subnautica in my head as well. What I think we need to press on the horror a bit too. Like the void is definitely scary, but I think we either need to make like the void taking you like an ever-present threat, which could be as simple as like, well, you have limited oxygen, and when you go out, you need to be mindful of that. But what are some other ways we can bring the horror into it?
Well, just so like a baby step to get there, I think it was an episode of Firefly I was watching the other day, and it's not the lack of oxygen that gets you first, it's the temperature drop, because there's nothing to hold the heat in anymore when you're in the vacuum of space. So like, even losing oxygen, losing temperature, now you're starting to see your breath in there, that it starts to get to that horror side of things. We just need an antagonist to establish the threat that we're trying to prevent.
What if these are all billionaires, right?
Yeah.
what if the thing that happened on Earth? This sounds silly. Some sort of radical group that I'm assuming that Earth like doesn't exist anymore. Like is that our premise? The billionaires are the last ones left. What if
something happens? Yeah,
it's we have a funny opportunity here to say a game that's about the poor billionaires stuck in space and the people on Earth who I don't know what exactly happened on Earth yet, but it involved some people that were hateful of the corporations, man, and wanted to have some sort of like global revolution related to that. Maybe that access to some sort of magical thing, and they used it and it fucked up. But in their zeal, they're coming for you up in space, and they hate you for how you ruined the planet and brought them to do this. I don't like the optics of this, but I'm trying to again connect the billionaire angle, so it's not just like survival in space.
Yeah, that's tough.
The true horror for the billionaires is that their money doesn't mean anything while they're up there. Like
I guess that could be it.
It's either the space station is either blown up by the radicals and only one section is workable and you have to build it out and make it functional through the space fishing, or space debris just rips the space station apart and you have to rebuild it. But like your money means nothing anymore, and not just for the billionaires and people who exist through money. Like, hey, in these situations, your imaginary paper currency doesn't matter, right? You can't buy your way out of this. What are they going to do? Like you can't communicate. You can't get another ship sent. You have to start fending for yourself. So I think, but like antagonistic wise, do we have a more the void of space and it taking you, whether that's in the temperature drop, the oxygen, and or the tether breaking, and you just getting cast into space? Do we add permadeath? Like you're playing with your mates, and if you die, like you're dead, and you cannot rejoin the server.
You can't be in their match anymore in a survival game. Oh god!
Well, it's fun
hearing how pissed I'd be.
The house of cards that introduces, because now you have to give that person something to do while they're out of the round.
Yeah, right.
And I wonder too if we could wire in the Among Us aspect of like, okay, Jay's out fishing for hardware. I'm gonna mess with like stocks or whatever to like steal his wealth back down on Earth while he's distracted with this, and you have to not just check on the hardware and the stuff you're building, but check on your crewmates too to make sure they're not working behind your back.
Yeah, there's an interesting angle there. I like that. The PvPvE, I guess, is what you could call it. We could. This is perhaps a little bit stereotypical, but also makes sense. Let's assume these billionaires are cynical people in it for themselves, right? They're acting out of self-interest. That's probably has something to do with how they got all their wealth. And what if they're trying to fuck each other over? There's also a good suggestion here in the chat. I like, could they be billionaires like Tony Stark, each having a genius in their own way? Maybe each of them has some sort of like specialty that's related to how they got all of their money somehow. Could be another cool angle to it. I like the idea that they're trying to fuck each other over.
I do as well. I like
and
that.
To clarify too, none of us are suggesting that just because you have wealth, you're a bad person. But like in terms of game mechanics, that's what makes it interesting.
Yeah, we're trying to market this idea.
Yeah.
The money people are the bad guys.
Sussy Guru 2000 gives €5 and says a game about billionaires should have a negative skill tree. With each level up, you actually get worse and failure becomes more likely.
Oh, amazing. So you actually, when you're skilling up, you're choosing the thing that will hurt you the least.
Yeah, there's a tangent, a game called Void Bastards.
Yeah, I know.
There's every time it's rogue light, I believe. And every time you spawn, you have negative attributes. And one of them is called anxiety, where the combat music will just come in, whether there's an enemy around or not. And
amazing.
That's like one of my favorite game mechanics that I've ever heard. So like stuff like that, I think it would, even if it's a positive, if it also assigns a negative and you're weighing those values, whenever you do a skill tree, I think that's a really important thing to do. And like games like Payday 2 nailed it in that regard.
And also like in a multiplayer aspect, how those negatives would affect you, but also the people around you. So you learn how to deal with those negatives, but it affects other people as well. It could be really interesting. Yeah, I'm always surprised about like how cool the ideas we come up with are. Like even in a joke perspective, this could actually be really interesting. Speaking of Void Bastards, we had a few months ago. One of the artists of Void Bastards was on Firelink. I was on it too for like 5 seconds, and then I broke my microphone and had to leave. But
Oh no,
it was for what I was there for. It was good. So check that out if you haven't, team.
that's cool. Void Bastards, as those of you who can see the footage now, has an awesome aesthetic to it. Really cool art style.
Yeah.
They had a sequel come out to Spiritual Successor. I can't remember something West.
Really?
Yeah.
I looked that up.
Yeah, and I don't have any association with them, but I hear their games are really good. I've watched friends play Void Bastards, and it looks like it was a well-made game and one of the best mechanics I've heard of.
Wild Bastards.
Oh well,
Yes,
simple enough.
Yeah.
that's the one.
Interesting. Yeah, it came out just a couple months ago.
Yeah, which is
Cool.
we were all lining up. I also played it at GDC. It's very fun.
I was just thinking too about our game design of, what is the antagonist, and maybe the stuff you reel in could have some sort of, again, the venom goo or something that's, if you accumulate too much, it creates, something that's going to hunt you or like negatively impact you in some way to like bring the threat home and not just have it be that the world's gone.
Also, like cultural like repercussions for like, say, if there are still factions down on Earth, the type of space debris you reel in can have negative connotations and relationship factors into like, oh no, we're using way too much Chinese satellite debris, and they're going to start sending people up to kind of deal with us, right? Because we're stealing their technology and stuff like that. There's so many aspects you could feed into this. I really like this. I could talk about. These are my favorite parts of these Death Head episodes we do, because it really fascinate me, and doing this back and forth really tickles me pink. But
I enjoy it too.
we got 2 minutes before we have to bounce, because we got places to be, stuff to do. So is there anything you guys would like to plug, to say before we bounce off this raft into space?
I have a quick bunch of bullet points that I wanted to sign off with. The Black Mesa Blue Shift team has an update coming out. They've been teasing about it. I don't want to give too much away for them, but it's coming up next week. Check that out.
Is that a mod project for people who don't know?
It is. It's a completely separate team, and they are remaking Blue Shift on the Black Mesa engine, and they're doing fantastic work. I always get a sneak peek of that, and I'm super grateful for that. Thanks to you all for having me. This has been a really good time. Thanks to my team. Thanks to the friends and family that support us. Special thanks to our community. We always sign off with, thanks to our community and stuff, but we really mean it. Like, we wouldn't be where we are today without our community. And like, I feel bad that I can't be more in the Discord and more on stream and stuff, but I have been working diligently behind the scenes so that we can be more in with the community, because they're a huge part of our success. Good. I really appreciate them. If you're interested in what we're doing next, check out our YouTube, because like I said, there's stuff coming there soon. And a plug for Jay as well. If you've not checked out Design Delve on YouTube, do check it out, because I watched that. I've not seen every episode, but I'm getting there, and it's really good stuff.
Thank you so much, man. That means a lot to me.
We were chatting. Let me tell them, guys. We were chatting before this call started. Like, oh, hey, how's it going? We're going to get started soon. And Adam shared, yes, that he does watch Design Delve. That's not something that just came up where he discovered it before the call. That's something that he already did. And I didn't know that. And
it means a lot to me. Like, it's always really nice. I make my show in such like because I solo produce the entire thing, right? I do everything.
Yep.
I'm in a very insular bubble. So like to me, I just kind of make a thing and just chuck it out to the world and then just move on to make the next one. So it always warms my heart with the community, and, friends like Adam come on and be like, yeah, I actually watch it. It always blows my mind. I'm like, oh my God, people watch this.
Yeah.
People watch my ramblings. So thank you, Adam. I really appreciate that.
Of course.
Thank you. All right. We got to bounce. Mikey.
All right.
You brought us in. Send us out.
All right.
Go on.
Well, I just want to say thank you again, everyone, for watching. We're going to have something very interesting on soon, so stay tuned. I guess I won't reveal it just yet, Jay, or should I? I'm referring, of course, to this thing that's happening next week.
Yeah, no, I reckon maybe hold off because there might be some.
Okay.
We'll see, like scheduling things, but it should.
Sure.
It's something next Friday should be happening, and it's going to be fun.
Yes. Stay tuned. Something next Friday involving us should be happening, and stay tuned. We'll leave it at that for now. And otherwise, you can catch us the Friday afterward, of course, talking about another lovely topic. I've been Mikey, and Jay. Tina couldn't make it, and this is Adam. Thanks so much for watching, and take care, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.